Begin today the Gemara on the Vav Amud Beis, 10 lines up from the bottom of the Yamud. Es sheyeshpa yidiyah betchila v'chulu. So the Gemara goes back now to the Mishnah, where it discusses the halacha of a person that's tamei, and he walked into the Beis Hamikdash and he forgot that he was tamei, or the person forgot that he's tamei and he ate from kachim, from a carbon. So he has to bring a carbon, a unique kind of carbon, which is called a oila v'yared. For the rich person, he brings a more expensive carbon, and for one that's poor, a cheaper carbon. And the Mishnah also said that the condition for bringing this carbon is yidiyah betchila v'yidiyah b'saif. He was aware of this tumah in the beginning, he forgot, and then later he realized what happened, then he brings the carbon. So here the Gemara is going to bring the source in the pasuk. Where does the Torah speak about this case, b'chlal, this carbon? As sheyesh ba yidiyah betchila v'chulu zak the Gemara Tana Rabbanan. We learned in the Braisa, minayin, from where do I know, she'ein akasav medaber ela betumas mikdash v'kedashav. That when the Torah speaks about this carbon of oila v'yared, how do I know that the pasuk is speaking about a person that's tamei, and he went into the Beis Hamikdash or he ate from kachim? Now, why is the Gemara asking this question? Because if you look in the pasuk where it speaks about this carbon that you bring of oila v'yared, it doesn't say that the person walked into the Beis Hamikdash or he ate from kachim. All it says in the pasuk over there is a person that will touch a davar tamei. Gemara is soon going to quote part of the pasuk. The pasuk, they probably bring it here on the side of the Gemara. On the next one, when they bring the pasuk, it says nefesh ashatiga b'chol davar tamei, or benivlas chayet meya, benivlas behemet meya, benivlas sheretz tamei, v'nela mimenu v'tamei v'oshem. He forgot, and then the pasuk says he touched something which is tamei and he forgot. He brings a carbon. But it doesn't say he forgot and what? What happened that he's bringing a carbon for this? A person is not allowed to touch something which is tamei. That for that itself he brings a carbon. What's the case that the pasuk is talking about? So the Gemara says, how do we know that this pasuk is saying that he forgot and he walked into the Beis Hamikdash or he ate from kachim? V'dinu, you could learn it out in the following way. Hayol v'hizir v'ana shalat tumeh. Since I see that the Torah does clearly speak about a person where when b'mezid, he was tamei and he walked into the Beis Hamikdash, or he b'mezid when he was tamei, he ate from kachim. There, the pasuk warns about the iser, and it also says the einish. When the einish for this is kares, Rashi here brings the psukim where it says clearly lo yitamus mikdashi, and also regarding lo yochal adashiyita, regarding kachim, and the pasuk there says clearly v'nichras, or another place that Rashi brings the psukim where there by b'mezid it clearly says the azhara and the einish. And also the chayiv carbon ala tumah. And we see that the carbon, the pasuk says that you chayiv to bring a carbon for tumah. So what kind of a tumah is it speaking about? When the Torah says that a person is chayiv kares b'mezid when he was tamei, what is it talking about? That he was tamei and he walked into the Beis Hamikdash or ate kachim. Carbon ala tumah. So too here, when the pasuk is saying that you bring a carbon oila v'yared for when he's tamei, lechiv ela al tumas mikdash v'kedashav. What is he chayiv for? He's chayiv for this, that he was in the Beis Hamikdash or he ate from kachim while it was tamei. But the Gemara asks, how do you know to compare this way? Maybe I could say that when the pasuk is speaking about the person that's tamei, that he has to bring a carbon oila v'yared, maybe it's speaking about something else. Truma. Maybe the pasuk is actually coming to speak only about a kayin that's tamei, and he's eating from truma. Where we also find over there, shehizir va'anash. There, the Torah warns that a kayin that's tamei should not eat from truma, as Rashi brings the pasuk as well, bekotchim lo yochal, which is referring to truma. And there as well, there's a einish. The einish by a person that eats truma while he's tamei is actually not kares, but it's a einish of misa b'dei shemayim. So maybe we should say that over here as well, when it says that he's tamei and he brings a carbon, oila v'yared, maybe it's referring to the kayin. And says the Gemara, no, it's not logical to say that that's what the pasuk means here, because le ashkechan ovein misa the chayav aleh carbon. We don't find by carbon chatos that a person that the einish b'mezid is misa b'dei shemayim, that if he does that b'sheigig, that he brings a carbon chatos. By all karbanis chatos, what is the einish b'mezid that you bring this carbon for? If it was done b'mezid, it would be chayav kares. And that same aveda, if it's done by mistake, b'sheigig, he brings a carbon chatos. So here as well, it's mistaver that what are we speaking about over here in the tumah? We're speaking about a tumah that a person walked into the Beis Hamikdash or ate from kachim where the einish is kares, not misa b'dei shemayim. The Gemara asks on this rule, no, maybe this carbon is different. Because as mentioned, what kind of a carbon chatas are we talking about? There's the regular carbon chatas that there's no difference if you're rich or poor. That's called a carbon chatas kavua. Everyone brings the same carbon chatas. And then there's carbon chatas that we're talking about over here, which is oila v'yayre. It depends on if you're rich or poor. So now, I would say, hanimili carbon kavua. A regular carbon chatas, which is the equal by everyone. There I could say that's a carbon that's brought only by a person that the averi he did, b'mezid would be kares. Aval oila v'yayre, the carbon we're talking about over here, which is a different kind of carbon chatas, it goes up and down. So, Nasi, I could learn out and say that in this case, you bring it even if the einish b'mezid is not kares. It's only misa b'dei shemaim, like by the kohen that eats truma when he's tamei. And I'll prove this to you. Midi dehava ashmias koil, just like you find regarding the isser of shmias koil. What's the isser of shmias koil? A person that knows testimony and he does not come and say the edus. Comes and says that he doesn't have the edus to say, he lies, and he doesn't say, we're going to learn later in the Masechta about this. He makes a shvuah that he doesn't have any testimony to say. So for this, you bring a carbon, or va'bitui svasayim, or the carbon of a shvuah, what the Masechta opened up with, shvuah shtaim shein arba, a person that makes a shvuah and the shvuah is not true. You bring a carbon for this, and when you bring a carbon oila v'yayred for these two averis, this is not averis that b'mezid yechayv kares for it. There's no kares for this b'mezid. B'mezid, it's malchus, but not kares, and not misa b'dei shemaim either. So maybe just like you see over here regarding this carbon oil v'yayre, that you bring this carbon even without it being a kind of aveda. Where b'mezid it's kares. So how do you know that the pasuk is talking over here about a case where it's kares? Mikdash, kaidesh, maybe it's talking about truma by a kohen. And it says the Gemara, Amakra, but the pasuk here says, ba. There's a miyat in the pasuk. It says ki yiga b'tumas adam. The pasuk says v'nela mimenu. It says l'chol tumasai sheyitma ba. The tuma that he became tummy with that extra word ba. What is it coming to tell you? L'mu'utei truma. Is that this pasuk when it says that you bring this carbon oil v'yayred, it's excluding truma. We're not speaking about the case of the kohen that ate from truma when he's tummy. So the Gemara asks, how do you know to be memait this way? Maybe I should say the opposite. Ba means l'mute mikdash. Maybe the word ba is coming to exclude, but it's coming to exclude the case of a person that was tamei and walked into the Beis HaMikdash or ate from kachem. And what's the pasuk coming to say? That for him, this kind of carbon, where you're giving an option for a poor person to bring a carbon that's cheaper, that wouldn't be enough. Ad maisi carbon kavua, and he has to bring a regular carbon chatos. Right, so the reason why the Gemara is assuming this now, the Gemara is saying because this is an aveda where b'mezid is kares. So just like you find by all avedas that b'mezid is kares, and b'shegig you bring a carbon chatas. What's that carbon chatas you bring b'shegig? Not a carbon oil v'yayred. You bring a carbon chatas which is called a chatas kavua, that everybody brings the same. So maybe over here when the pasuk is saying by tumah that you bring a carbon oil v'yayred, that's talking only about a kohen. Where the b'mezid, the einish is misa b'dei shemayim, not kares. There the Torah says the carbon chatas will also be different, oil v'yayred. But maybe over here regarding a person that was tamei and went to the Beis HaMikdash or ate from kachem, maybe he brings a regular carbon chatas. So b'kitzur, we're left with the question: how do we know that a person that's tamei and was in the mikdash or ate from kachem brings this carbon of oil v'yayred? So the Gemara here brings the gzeira shaveh, and the Gemara says Kari Rava alei de Rebbe. Rava said regarding Rebbe that brought the source of this gzeira shaveh, Daile mayim mibayris amukim. He drew water from a deep pit and brought the source for this concept. The Tanya, as we learned in the Braise, Rebbe says, Ekro ani, in this pasuk, that it speaks about this person that's tamei, and it says that he brings a carbon. So I could read in the pasuk where it says chaya. Mentioned before the lashon of the pasuk. In the pasuk it says a person that touches b'chol davar tamei, and then it says oy benivlas chaya tmeya, oy benivlas behema tmeya. Why does it have to say both chaya and tmeya? Chaya and behema, that is. Usually, we know that chaya and behema are the same thing by the parsha where it speaks about what's kosher and what's not kosher, and the behema is chaya. It said Rashi that says chaya and behema is the same thing. So it could say chaya, behema lama nemra. Why does it say that if a person touches a behema, a dead carcass of a behema? So the answer is that extra word behema is for gzeira shaveh. Nema kam behema tmeya. The pasuk here uses the term behema tmeya, v'nema la'alam behema tmeya, and it says also in the pasuk behema tmeya regarding a person that is touching a behemoth tmeya and he eats from kachim. So mala halon tumas kaidesh, just like over there when it says behemoth tmeya, it speaks about a person that's eating from kachim b'mezid and he's chayiv kares. Avkan tumas kaidesh. Here in this pasuk as well, when it says that the person touched the behemoth tmeya and he brings a carbon oil of v'yayid, and the pasuk doesn't spell out what did he do after he became tamei. What happened that he's bringing the carbon for this? It's just like in the other case of behemoth tmeya that he ate from kachim. This is where we see that if you eat from kachim, that's when you bring the carbon oil of v'yayid. The Rishonim point out, the introduction that the Gemara here said, that Rav said on this Gzeir Shaveh, that Rebbe drew this concept from a deep place. What was the big thing? This is the first Gzeir Shaveh we have in the Gemara. We always have a Gzeir Shaveh. What was the big chiddush of this drasha of Rebbe? Apparently, so the Rishonim say there was a Kabbalah for this Gzeir Shaveh, but no one could find where that Gzeir Shaveh is. And Rebbe identified that the Gzeir Shaveh is in the words Behema, Behema. It's one shot. Okay, but the Gemara asks, we're still not done, because Ashkechan Tumas Kaidesh. Here we have Gzeir Shaveh learning out Behema, Behema, that in the other place where it says the term Behema, it's speaking about a person that's eating from Kachim. Tumas Mikdash Minolam. How do we know that in this pasuk it's also including a person that was Tamei and he forgot and he walked into the Beis HaMikdash when he was Tamei, that he brings his carbon oil of V'yayid? On Makra, so here the Gemara is going to try a few different options until it comes to the conclusion. So first the Gemara says, on Makra, the pasuk says, B'chol kodesh leisiga ve'ela mikdash leisavei. By a yoldis, when she's tamei, and the pasuk says she shouldn't touch any kodesh, which really means she shouldn't eat any kodesh, and also ve'ela mikdash leisavei, she shouldn't walk into the Beis HaMikdash. It says both in the same pasuk together. Iskish mikdash lekodesh. We compare walking to the Beis HaMikdash, eating from kachim, and therefore here as well regarding a person that's tamei and he forgot and he walked into the Beis HaMikdash, he brings the carbon oil of v'yayid, just like a person that ate from kachim. But the Gemara asks, if that's your source, the comparison that you see in this pasuk, ihachi trumenami. So then I should say that the same thing should apply also regarding truma. I could include over here in this pasuk also truma. What we were discussing before regarding a kayin that was tamei and eats from truma, I shall learn it out from this very pasuk as well. Why? Where do I see truma in this pasuk? It says b'chol kodesh leisiga. How do I know truma here? Because the master has said, and we learned this in the Gemara in Makis, b'chol kodesh leisiga. When it says here in this pasuk that you should not touch or not eat really from kodesh, what is it referring to? L'Rabbi says truma. Because it says b'chol, it's coming to add truma as well. That's what it's also included here. So if so, we see in this pasuk truma. So maybe I should learn from here to say that the same would apply by truma, that you bring a carbon oil of v'yayid. Says the Gemara, no, you can't include truma because we already brought before a miyat for that. Ha miyat rachmane ba. The Torah says that word ba, that chol tumasay sheyitma ba, that it's excluding the case of truma, that over there you don't bring a carbon oil of v'yayid. Okay, but the Gemara asks, how do you know that that's what the exclusion is about? Maybe you say the opposite. Maybe say that word ba is coming to say that a person that's tamei and walking to the Beis HaMikdash, he does not bring the carbon oil of v'yayid, and the truma is included. We have an exclusion, and we have here this pasuk that compares walking into the Beis HaMikdash to b'chol kodesh leisiga. So how do you know how or truma? Or it's comparing truma to eating from kachim. How do you know what to exclude and what to be marba, what to include? Says the Gemara, so we're going to have to say al pisvara. Mistavre, it's logical to say mikdash loy mimatinon. We're not going to exclude a person that walks into the Beis HaMikdash when he's tamei, because shekain bekaris kamaisa, because we're going to compare that to one that eats kachim, because they're both similar, that they both have the same einish of karis when it was done b'mezid. That's why these two are compared. And truma, where the einish is not karis, the einish is misa b'dei shemayim, that's different. So we don't compare that. But the Gemara says, no, Adarabbe, I'll bring you a different, opposite svara. Truma leime matinon. It's illogical not to exclude truma. Shekein achilasa kamaisa. Truma is a isser of eating while you're tamei, just like the eating of kachim. Walking into the Beis HaMikdash is not eating. It's a different thing. Maybe I should say that the pasuk where it says that you bring a carbon oil of v'yayid, it's only talking about a person that eats when he's tamei, whether he eats kachim when he's tamei, or a kind that eats truma when he's tamei. Maybe it's only those two, but not someone that walks into the Beis HaMikdash. So we're back to our question. Regarding walking into the Beis HaMikdash, where do you see that you have to bring a carbon oil of v'yayid? So the Gemara tries another option. Elo Amar Rava, so therefore Rava says, the source is as follows. We find in the Torah, Shalosh Krisais B'Shlomim. It says in the Torah 3 times that a person that eats from a carbon shlomim, when he's tamei, that he's chayiv kares. Rashi here brings, it says at one time in Parshas Emor, it says it twice in Parshas Tzav. 3 times that a person that eats from kachim, from shlomim, that he's going to be tamei. That he gets kares, that is. When he's tamei, he gets kares. Why 3 times? Lama, so why is this? So the answer is, achas leklal. 1, the first time it tells me the klal, the concept that a person that eats from kachim, he gets kares. And that's it when he eats from kachim when he's tamei. Then v'achas leprat. 1 is a prat. What does this v'achas leprat here mean? So Rashi explains, v'achas leprat means the first time, or one of the times when the Torah writes that when one that eats from kachim, he gets kares, it uses in the Torah the general term of kachim. Now that term of kachim could include any kind of kachim, not only kachim of a carbon that's brought from Mizbeach, it could even include kachim when someone donated something that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, the Bedek HaBayis, not as a carbon, that even if you eat from that, when you're tamei, you'd be chayav kares. So therefore, the leprat, the second time the Torah writes the lashon shlomim, that it's specifically talking about a carbon. So what do you learn out from the word shlomim? Just like the word shlomim means a carbon, so too the kares for one that eats from kachim when he's tamei is similar to shlomim, which is a carbon brought for the mizbeach. Now she says that this lashon of the Gemara v'achas leprat is the limud, the klal of kol davar shahaya b'chlal. The Yotza min haklal, l'lamed lo l'lamed l'atzmi yotza, el l'lamed l'klal kula yotza. The Torah lechatchila writes the general klal of kachim, that if you tamei and you eat from it, you get kares. Then it specifies specifically one case of kachim. It's Yotza min haklal, in that case of shlomim, and therefore that teaches regarding the whole klal that the kachim the Torah is speaking about is only a kachim for the carbon for the mizbeach. And Rashi also explains that this is, the Gemara over here does not darshan this as a klal uprat. Usually when the Torah says a klal or prat, the prat is here to explain the klal, and therefore we're not marbe more than the prat. It's only specifically the prat. And here that would mean that it would only be shlomim and not any other carbon other than shlomim. So Rashi says the klal and the prat in this case are not written together. They're not written one right after the other. And therefore we don't darshan it that way. Ashi and the Rishonim also explain why this drasha here is different than a klal or prat. A klal, okay, there's a separate tarichas about that. Okay, so those are the 2 times that the Torah said. Now, v'achas, the 3rd time that the Torah writes about this, that one should not eat from a carbon from kachim when he's tamei. Why does it have to say the 3rd time? L'tomeh haksuv b'Torah stam. It's coming to explain regarding this that we're discussing here. When the Torah writes the tomeh stam, and it doesn't specify what that tumah is talking about, that he has to bring a carbon oil of a for it, and it doesn't say what happened when he was tamei. I don't know what it's talking about. So that's the 3rd time that the Torah writes this, that a person eats from kachim, to tell me that you have to apply it to this, that the Torah wrote stam, this that a person became tamei, that he brings a carbon, that what kind of a tumah is it speaking about? The tumah that the person ate from kaidesh, that then he brings a carbon. Okay, but now here there's another step to this. If it's not necessary to teach me this halacha that if you eat from kaidish when you tamei, that you bring a carbon, why don't I need it for this? Because the nafkaleh med the Rebbe, as the Gemara already brought before, the Gzeir Shava of beheme, that teaches me that point. So tanei tumas mikdash. We then say that it refers to something else which is similar to it, which is tumas mikdash, a person that's tamei that walks into the base of mikdash. That's the source. This 3rd time that it says this concept in Igeya to eating from shlamim. No, that can't be the source. This 3rd time is teaching something else. But that 3rd time teaches me what Rabbi Vo said. Rabbi Vo said, Shalish krisis b'shlamim lama. Why does the Torah repeat this point 3 times that you get kares for eating from a shlamim when you tamei? So achas, as we explained, leklal, for the general klal of kachim. V'achas leprat. Then it specifies that it's only a shlamim and what's similar to a shlamim. And then v'achas, what's the 3rd time? L'dvarim she'eino nechalin. It's coming to say that when a person eats from kachim, even if it's not things that are edible, he didn't eat from a carbon. He ate, let's say, from the wood of the mizbeach, or he ate from something that's from kachim that's not even edible at all. That even there'll also be a kares. That's what the 3rd time comes to teach. Not the halacha that we're trying to say here, a person that walked into the Beis HaMikdash when he was tamei. And the Gemara says furthermore, there's actually an opinion that argues about this. Well, Rab Shimon's opinion is, if a person eats from kachim, from something from the mizbeach that's not edible, ein chayav aleim kares, there actually is no kares for that. Mishum Tomeh, when he was Tomeh, Lasuye, so then the 3rd time here is there's also a drasha for a different thing, not what we are trying to use it for here. What is it coming to teach? Lasuye chatois hapnimius. It's coming to add that when one eats from a carbon chatos, and it's called chatayis apnimius, inside chatas, because the blood of this carbon is not sprayed on the outside mizbeach. It's sprayed on the inside mizbeach, or onto the kapayir, or by the pareiches inside the Beis Hamikdash. Even by that chatos, there's the iser and kares if you eat from it when you're tamei. Why do I need a special pasuk for that? Because I would think to say, since Rab Shimon says, any kind of carbon that is not brought on the outside mizbeach, kishlomim, similar to the way the shlomim is, ein chayavin olav mishum pigel. The concept of pigel does not apply there. Pigel is when a person that's being matakayin, that's being makrib the carbon, has a thought that he's going to eat it or do something with it, chutzlis, outside its zman, outside its regular time period. And he says that this halacha of pigel does not apply to such a kind of carbon, because in the Torah, where it says the din of pigel, it writes it only by a shlomim. So the din of pigel only applies by a carbon that's similar to the shlomim that's sprayed and brought on the outside mizbeach. So mishum tumeh nami loy. Maybe I would think similar regarding tumeh. The isser that the Torah says that you're not allowed to eat from kachim when it's tameh and you get kares for this. Maybe it's also only by something that's like the shlomim, which is on the outside mizbeach, and not the chatas where the blood is sprayed on the inside. Therefore, kamash malon the mechayev. That's the third time that the Torah writes over here this kares for eating from kachim when you're tameh, to say that it includes this kind of carbon as well. So therefore, we're back to our question. We don't have a source that a person would bring a carbon oil v'yared if when he's tameh he walked into the Beis Hamikdash. This third time here is not a source for that. So Ella, the Gemara tries to use the same source that it's bringing here, but a little bit differently. Amri Nardai says Mishmei the Rav in the name of Rava. These three cases we just mentioned, it's not only that it says it 3 times in the Torah, and it says 3 times the term of kares, but also shalish tumais b'shlomim lama. By each one of these cases, the Torah repeats again tumasei boy that the person is tamei. Why does it have to say 3 times the term tumah? So again, here the Gemara tries to say the same point. Achas leklal, one is coming to tell me the general klal, achas leprat, and one is specifying that it's specifically similar to shlomim, only the kachim of mizbeach. And va'achas, and the third time that the Torah uses the term of tumah here, l'tumah aksuva b'Torah stam, it's coming to teach regarding what we're speaking about here. The tumah that the Torah wrote stam, and it didn't specify what happened with this tumah. Ve'eni yedei mayi have oimet tumas kaidesh. So I would say that it's coming to say that this person that was tamei, he ate from kachim, and ve'eni eni lo tumas kaidesh. And if you don't need it for that, because the nafkalem the Rabbi already said before the gzeira shava of behema taneyu eni lo tumas mikdash. So it's coming to teach regarding a person that's tamei and walking to the Beis Hamikdash that he brings the carbon oil v'yared. But the Gemara says you can't learn out from the term tumah that it says here. Just like we said before, the fact that the Torah repeats 3 times the term of kares in these cases, that it's not extra. The same is regarding this when the Torah repeats the term tumah as well. Because the term tumah here is also needed because Aidi the boy l'michta of kares. Since the Torah wants to write the 3rd time of Kares regarding what we learned out before, like what Rabavo came to say, that it's coming to teach regarding even things that are not edible. So therefore, Kasav Nami Tumis, the Torah has to use the term Tumis, because otherwise you would have no idea what the pasuk is talking about. I can't just say the 3rd time Kares without writing the word Tumah. Then you wouldn't know what the Kares is for. So therefore, the term Tumah is not extra. So now the Gemara concludes and says, Elo Amar Rava. So therefore Rava says, what's the source for this? That a person that's tamei and comes into the Beis Hamikdash, that he has to bring a carbon oil v'yared, that's a gzeira shava. Asya tum asay tum asay. The gzeira shava of the term tumah that it says here to the term tumah that it says elsewhere. Ksiv achir, the pasuk says l'chol tum asay, for his tumah. Uksiv hasam, and the pasuk says by a person that is tamei and he comes into the Beis Hamikdash, and this is in the parsha of Paraduma, tamei yiyeh oy tumasei boy. So ma'ala alon tumas mikdash, just like there, that pasuk is talking about the tumah of a person that's walking into the Beis Hamikdash. Avkan tumas mikdash. Here as well, it's talking about a tumah of the person that walking to the Beis Hamikdash. That's what it's talking about. So what's the conclusion of the Gemara? This halacha that a person that's tamei and eats from kachim or walks into the Beis Hamikdash and when he forgot that he brings the carbon oil v'yared. Where do we know this from? It's 2 gzeira shavas. The gzeira shava of Rebbe, behema, and the gzeira shava that Rava brings here now, the gzeira shava of tumasei. So now the Gemara asks, based on this conclusion, if so, ve'elo ba lamali. Before the Gemara said that there's an exclusion in the word of ba to exclude truma, that a kain that eats when he's tummy from truma, that he doesn't bring this carbon. What do I need that exclusion for? So Rashi explains what the Gemara is asking is that now that I have two clear sources for these two that you bring a carbon oil of these two are cases where there's kares. Why would I think that this would apply similarly regarding truma, where there is no kares by truma? What do I need a special exclusion to learn out that it does not apply for truma? Answers the Gemara. This ba here is l'rabais nivlas oif toir. It's actually coming to add to say that even a person that eats from a oif and a vela, a dead carcass of a oif toir, of a kosher bird, that he becomes tamei, then in this case as well, if he walks into the Beis HaMikdash or eats from kachem, he's going to have to bring a carbon. Now this case of nivlas oif toir is different than other kind of tumah. You have the tumah of when a person touches a behemoth, there he becomes tumah just by touching. By the nivlas oif toir, you don't become tamei just by touching. The tumah is only if you eat it, if it's in the Beis HaBliyah, if the person eats from this. So the tumah is in a different way. So it's coming to say that even this tumah as well, the same halacha applies, that he would have to bring a carbon for this. That's what the word ba is coming to add. So the Gemara clarifies right away. How could you say that it's coming to add? Ha'amre, didn't we say before, ba miyutehu? The word ba is an exclusion, ba, only this and not something else. Now we're saying that it's coming to add something. So the Gemara answers, Mishum de miyutehu iyater. Because it's a miyut, it's actually an extra miyut. It's an exclusion, it's a double exclusion. Why is this? Because ksiv, the pasuk says, Oy ki yiga. The pasuk says, if you would touch, and when it speaks over here about this person that's chayiv to bring this carbon oil of yared, it says that if he's going to touch something which is tamei, the bar negiya in, the la bar negiya loy. So that already would exclude the case of a person that became tamei from the nivlas oif tahir. Because as I just mentioned, only by a behemoth do you become tamei by touching it. By the nevela of the oif, the tumah there, the Torah says if it's an oif tahir, then the tumah is only if he swallowed it, if he eats from it. So that already excludes. Uksiv ba miyut, and then it also says the word ba, which is another miyut, come to exclude something. So have a miyutach a miyut. So this is a double exclusion, and the rule is when the Torah comes and excludes something twice, the second exclusion is coming to say that you have to exclude from the first exclusion, and therefore that's actually marba. We come and add to say that the tumah that a person's chayiv for tumas mikdash kadashav includes not only a case of the behemoth but also the oif as well. So this is the source for this halacha that you chayiv the carbon of oil v'yayid. The next part of the Mishnah, it said, Yesh ba yidiyah b'tchila, ve'ein ba yidiyah b'sayf. So as mentioned that the condition to bring this carbon is when he was aware in the beginning and he's aware in the end. And he forgot in the middle. So in a case where the person was aware in the beginning and then he forgot, but he never remembered afterwards what happened. So how does he get his kapara? The soil that's brought on Yom Kippur, and the blood sprayed inside the Beis HaMikdash and inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that's what's mechaper for this tumah. This is actually in this week's parsha. So Tan Rabbanon. So we learned in the Braise, the pasuk says, "V'chiper ala kodesh mitumas b'nei Yisrael v'goyme," that it'll be mechaper for the kodesh of the tumas of Yidden. What kind of a tumah is it speaking about that this is a kapara for? Yashli be'inyin zeh lahavi shalish tumas. When the Torah uses this expression that the carbon on Yom Kippur is mechaper for the tumah of Yidden, I could apply this tumah to three different scenarios which are called tumah in the Torah. I could say it's tumas of Avodah Zarah, and I could say it's tumah of Gilui Arayis, and I could also say it's tumah of Shvichas Damim, when one spills blood. In all these three cases, the Torah uses the expression of tumah. As the Braise says, by Avodah Zarah, regarding Avodah Zarah, the pasuk says, Laman Tames Mikdashi. When one serves Avodah Zarah, it's Metame, my holiness. The Gilui Arayis, regarding illicit relationships, the Torah says, Shmartem es Mishmarti, Levilti Asais, Michukes Hatayeves V'Gaime. So this is where the Torah says, it's also I think in this week's parasha, where the Torah speaks about all the arayas and it uses the term of tumah as well. V'lo yisetamu behem, should not be tummy with this. B'shvichas damim regarding one that spills blood, the pasuk says, V'lo tetame es, do not make the land tummy with shvichas damim. So Yachol, I would think that al gimel tumas alalu yesar mechaper, that goat that's brought in Yom Kippur in the Beis HaMikdash, that it's mechaper for these three tumas. Talmud Loimar, but the pasuk says mi tumas b'nei Yisrael, that it's mechaper from only some of the tumas that are by Yidden. V'loi kol tumas, Not all these cases that we just mentioned. So which one is it? So the Brisa says, Ma matzinu, just like we find, Shecholak HaKosav Miklal Kol Tumas. What do we find that the Torah singles out from all other tumas that it's different? Havayim tumas mikdash v'kedashav. That's the tumah when a person is tameh and he walks into the base of mikdash or eats from kachim. This is different, and the Gemara will later explain in what way it's different. But this stands out. Afkan, so too over here, when it says mi tumais, that the side and Yom Kippur is mechaper for one of the tumais, what is it talking about? The tumas mikdash v'kedashav. It's this tumah when a person walks into the base of mikdash or he eats from kachim that this carbon is mechaper. Rabbi Yehuda, this is how Rabbi Yehuda explains how we know it's talking specifically about this tumah. Rab Shimon says, from the words in the pasuk itself, it's clear exactly which tumah it's speaking about. Because v'chiper al hakodesh mitumais. What does that mean? Mitumais shel kodesh. It's mechaper for the tumah that a person came into kodesh or he ate from kachim. That's the kind of tumah we're talking about. Okay, but now the Brisa goes on to say, what did it say specifically in the Mishnah? For which kind of case is this soyer coming to be mechaper? If there was a yidi in the beginning, he knew in the beginning, but he didn't realize in the end. So now the Brisa asks, Yochayel al kol tumis shabim kodesh yei soyer zeh mechaper. I would think that this comes to be mechaper for any type of tumah b'kodesh. It could be a case where he did not know in the beginning, he did not know in the end, or a case where he knew that maybe it's coming to be mechaper in other kinds of cases as well. Talmud Loima, the pasuk says, Umi pish'ayem l'chol chataysam. Continuation, the pasuk says, from the pish'ayem. Pish'ayem is usually a term that's used in the Torah for an aveda b'mezid. And then it says l'chol chataysam, which is a term that's used for an aveda that's b'sheigeg. So therefore I compare and say, Chatoyim dumyu de pshayim. What kind of aveda are we talking about over here? A chet that's similar to a pesha, which a person does b'mezid. Ma pshayim, just like an aveda b'mezid, she'enam b'nei carbon. There's no carbon for this. Av chatoyim she'enam b'nei carbon. So too over here, what is this coming to be mechaper for? A case where there's no carbon for it. But in a case where there is a carbon for it, because it meets the conditions that requires the carbon. He had the awareness in the beginning, and then he forgot, and then he has the awareness in the end, that it's not mechaper, that the person has to bring the carbon for it. But furthermore, the Brisa says, even in a case where there's no carbon, there's still two scenarios, because the condition is there has to be a yediyah in the betchila and the yediyah b'seif. What did the Mishnah say? For which case is the sar mechaper Yom Kippur? When he had a yediyah betchila, but he did not have a yediyah b'seif. Maybe the sar on Yom Kippur is mechaper for the opposite, when he did not have the awareness in the beginning, but he does have an awareness in the end. That is that case that this sar is Taila and then Yom Kippur is Mechaper for it. Maybe it's the opposite case when he did not have the Yediyah in the beginning and he does have the Yediyah in the end. Talmud Loima l'chol chatoisam. That's where the pasuk adds the word l'chol chatoisam, which is chayve chatois b'mashma. We're speaking about a kind of case where it's possible that he would come to a chiyav chatas. He had the Yediyah b'tchila, but later he didn't remember. But when he does remember later, he will have to bring this carbon. That's the kind of carbon that Yom Kippur will be mechaper until he'll remind himself and bring the carbon. So meanwhile, Yom Kippur is mechaper. That's the case that we're talking about. Taylor is the Brisa. Okay, let's just see one case in the Brisa. It's a piece of the Gemara that goes in the next Amud, but let's see. Omar, so the Tani here said in the Brisa. Yashli be'inyan azel lahavi gimel tumas. I could say that when it says it that it's mechaper for the tumah by Yidden, maybe it's speaking about all three tumas that we see the Torah uses the term tumah for this. Tumas avodah zarah, tumas gilead rayis, and tumas shvichas damim. So the Gemara asks, "Hi avodah zarah hechi dami." When it says avodah zarah, what are we talking about? I b'meized. If a person serves avodah zarah b'meized, bakatalu. For that case, the person's chayiv misa. So the sorry of Yom Kippur is not mechaper. If it happened b'sheigig, so then bar carbonu. For that he's chayav to bring a carbon, and the carbon that he brings is going to be mechaper. Says the Gemara, no, I would think that it's referring to a case of b'mezid v'lo yasr bey, if he served avodah zarah deliberately, but there was no warning, so there's no misa, or b'sheigig v'lo yasyad alei, in a case where he did it b'sheigig and he didn't even realize what he did, he never found out, that maybe then is the case of the kapara. The Gemara says a similar thing exactly regarding the other cases as well. Gilead Ayis Nami, when it said in the Brisa that maybe it's mechaper for Gilead Ayis, Heichidami, what's the case? Ibemezid, if it's bemezid, then Barkatalo, he's chayiv misi, Ibeshegig, Bar Carbonu, then he's chayiv carbon. So the case is no, bemezid v'lo yasru bey, if it's bemezid but there was no asra, or b'shegig v'lo yisyadalei, and b'shegig and he didn't remember. And the same thing regarding Shvichas Damim Nami Heichidami. What's the case the Brisa thinks is included in the kapara of Yom Kippur? Yeah, a person that kills b'shegig is exiled, and there's no kapara from the carbon on Yom Kippur. And the Gemara answers, b'mezid v'loy asrbe, and b'shegig v'loy yisyadalei, that he didn't realize, or by a shegig of a person that spills blood, it could be a different case. Inami b'hanach delav b'nei galus ninu. There are many cases, as we learned in Masechta Makis, where a person kills b'shegig and he's not chayiv to go into galus. As Rashi here brings one example when it happened derech aliyah, when a person killed someone b'shegig and it was an upward motion. That there's other examples that a person would not be chayiv galus, and then you would think that the carbon on Yom Kippur is machaper.